y'all. This is Curtis Grimes, and I want to give a shout out and a special thank you to everyone associated with TNCRadio.live.
Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, TNCRadio.live. This is Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Keller, and we're going to be here with you for the next hour or so talking about all sorts of good things, not the least of which is we're going through an acrostic that Dr. Cortman put together of the word forgive. Dr. Cortman, one of the things that we've been talking about is that in your many years of doing therapy with people, you found that one of the most debilitating and what's the right word? Struggles that people have is their unwillingness to forgive and the damage that does to a person's psyche over a long period of time. So before we jump in there, how are you doing today, Doc?
Doing great. Thank you for asking, and I trust that you're well too. I appreciate the privilege of being with you tonight and on your wonderful show.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we thank you so much for being with us this evening. So, Dr. Cortman, this issue that so many people seem to have around forgiveness, where they just, I want to say, are unable, but I guess that's not really true, because forgiveness is really an action and a decision, is it not?
You know, it is a decision, and it's a choice, and it requires a lot of courage sometimes to be able to say that I choose to let go of resentment that I have. And it's one of these things where we may have to forgive more than one time, because it's easy and possible to forgive somebody and then reach back and reclaim the resentment all over again, even though I thought I let it go. And that can happen when people get divorced, or it can happen when people have been in bad car accidents and the other person was completely at fault due to drunk driving or carelessness or whatever. In other words, if someone really wronged you, if someone really violated you, and there are consequences in your life that are current, it's easy to not only refrain from forgiving, but it's easy to regain my hurt and frustration and resentment after forgiving. So one of the things that you and I have been talking about over the weeks is that we put together the word forgive, and we have 7 different words that spell out the word forgive, and each one of these have been linked by research to longer lives, longevity, and greater happiness if people were to practice these 7 principles. And the F word for forgive is actually forgive. And last time we talked about the O word, which is optimism. And optimism, we discovered, is also a choice. It's an explanatory style, meaning that we can explain the world to ourselves in a very optimistic way, basically to say that things will always work out, for instance, to those who love God, as the scripture says, or we could say that according to fate, if what comes around goes around, and if I tend to live a good life promoting others, I'd like to believe that good things will come around, or even just a slant on it that says everything is for a purpose, and I will learn and I will grow. And what we've learned is that people who are optimistic, again, live longer, are happier. And then there's a whole slew of medical research, like people have better outcomes with cancer. People have better outcomes with pregnancy. They're less likely to suffer from cardiac issues. They're less likely to succumb to a stroke. So we talked about that last time, and I promised everyone this time that we would move on to the R word. And the R word, you could probably think of a lot of different R words. It's a pretty popular consonant. But the one I'd like to use is relationships. And just like forgiveness and optimism, Tom, relationships are just chock full of importance when it comes to not only one's mental health, but again, physical health. All of these things, to remind you, the listener, they're all linked with living longer and living happier. And when I say relationships, let me begin with friendships. There is new research, Tom, that says that when people have good friends, even in fifth grade, we've done longitudinal studies and discovered that these people are happier as adults, and they're less likely to succumb to depression when they have meaningful connections as early as fifth grade. We have research that says having childhood friends sort of insulates us from negative outcomes as adults. And we have consistent research that says we need friends throughout our entire lifetime, that that friends are again linked with much happier people. And now the Surgeon General put something out that confirms a new concern that we have, which is the opposite of having friends, also known in psychological terms as isolation. And isolation is exactly what it sounds like. It's just you and nobody else. But we find out that isolation has a way of significantly reducing life. And people in my field, Tom, are calling isolation the new smoking. People are not smoking the way they used to, not even close to, because we finally demonstrated across the board how dangerous, what a high risk behavior this was. But now we know that isolation has kind of taken over. When people are alone, when people have no one else in their lives, it takes a tremendous toll on their physical health. And one of the places it tends to show up is cardiac health. Loneliness is a high risk for heart disease. It's one of the main factors that physicians would look for regarding heart disease. Excuse me, I was referring to or alluding to the Surgeon General's report that said as many as 15 years can be lost in life with chronic isolation. And, I know we're talking to a population of drivers out there, many of which spend a lot of time not only on the road, not only away from the families that they love, but alone. And is this a concern? It is a concern, and it is something, that we want people to take positive action on.
That's something that we talked about in one of our first discussions, Doc, was loneliness and how lonely it can be out there on the road. And if I remember correctly, it was like the number 5 reason. It was one of the top 5 reasons that people quit being drivers is because of the loneliness that they experience when they're out there, sometimes for weeks at a time, where they don't really see a friend during any of that time. Okay, you can talk to somebody on the phone while you're going down the road. Maybe when you're not on the road, you can do a little FaceTime or something like that. But it's not the same. And then
it's not the same, but at the same time, I would still encourage all of those things. Well, sure. They are better than having no human contact.
Yes.
If it's either you all by yourself, or you're FaceTiming someone or texting someone or calling someone, it's true what the old commercial said. It is the next best thing to being there. but I wouldn't want to discourage the being there part.
Right.
It's hard to it's hard to replace a hug. It's hard to replace a good, strong handshake and an eye-to-eye contact with somebody who loves and adores you. There's a lot to be said for being in the presence of people. I don't know how scientific it is, but we used to have instructions that say get a minimum of 4 hugs a day. And those are really hard to replace when, you're on the road.
Sure. Absolutely. Very hard. I tell you what, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to TNCRadio.live, Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Kelly. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay right there.
Driving 11 hours a day, 7 days a week can be emotionally and physically exhausting. Sleep is a very important part of a long-haul truck driver's life. Being well-rested and alert makes driving a lot safer for both the trucker and other drivers on the road. Getting enough sleep may sound easier than it seems. Living on the road makes it difficult to get the recommended 8 hours of sleep. In fact, it's common for truckers to not get 8 hours of sleep due to the 11-hour work shift. To help, we've put together 5 tips to help truckers stay awake while driving. Take vitamins. One way truckers can stay awake while driving is by taking vitamins. Not only are vitamins good energy boosters, they have tons of other health benefits too. Vitamin B helps with fatigue, depression, mood boosting, and muscle weakness. Consider adding vitamins to your morning routine. Eat healthy. An unhealthy diet has a huge impact on one's overall health. Dr. Jennifer Sachek says, our bodies rely on the energy and nutrients we get from food. So what you eat and how and when you eat it can either drain you or sustain you. It might be more convenient to stop at a fast food restaurant or truck stop, but constantly eating junk food drains your energy. Take a nap. Before you hit the road, consider taking a short 20-minute nap. Several studies have shown that a quick nap immediately increases alertness and gives a boost in cognitive performance. Stay hydrated. Water has many health benefits. One benefit is reducing the chance of being fatigued. Drinking a pint of cold water is a great way to refresh yourself and stay more alert. Listen to upbeat music. Listening to upbeat music will have you tapping your foot, singing along, and staying alert in no time. Avoid listening to relaxing music or audiobooks. Those tend to make drivers more relaxed and sleepy. Truckers have a very demanding job. In order to deal with the stress and demands, it's very important to get the right amount of sleep. Hopefully these 5 tips will help you stay awake while driving. TNCRadio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Welcome back in TNC Radio.live. So happy to have you all with us this evening. We're talking about the word forgive, and today we're talking about relationships. Dr. Chris, before we went to break, you were talking about how important it is to have those relationships where you can actually reach out and touch someone, as they used to say. Well, wasn't that a long distance? It was like AT&T long distance.
Yeah, it was definitely a telephone company. It's the next best thing to being there.
Right. Reach out and touch someone.
Great advertisement, because they want you to know that, yes, we would all love to hang with our friends, but even if we can't, a phone call goes a long way.
That's right.
You know what's happened in the past decade or so? People don't talk on the phone anymore.
No, they just
people text and they use social media, but especially, instead of calling somebody, I am significantly more likely to text them, because it's a time saver and we don't have to go, hey, how's it going? How was your day? What's going, it's just right to the point, like, Hey, hope you're well. What's going on Tuesday night? And it's so convenient. And you can have several of those conversations going at the same time, which you can't do, if you're talking to somebody on the phone.
Right.
And we have a generation who's lost a lot of people skills. There's research to document that the younger children don't have, the same kind of face-to-face skills. There's a lot of social anxiety out there because people are not comfortable, in face-to-face, eye-to-eye relationships.
Well, and made worse by a pandemic where everybody put on a mask for 2 years.
Absolutely. We have all this stuff that says whatever you do, you need people. And then we get the government saying social distancing, keep 6 feet away from people. And it, flies in the face of what we need and what the research says people need to thrive.
Right. Exactly. So
what's nice? The research is also saying that, close friends that we established early in life don't always take a lot of extra work to rekindle. I was talking to a college buddy on Saturday, and I have a link with 5 or 6 of them, a thread, I guess you would call it, where we can all text and every one of us sees it. And what's nice is when we do get on the phone or when we do get together, it's the same connection. It's like we just pick up where we left off. And that's what the research says. You can keep people for lifelong friendships. And sometimes even after years of not seeing each other, just hooking up again, just making a little effort. Men are not as good as women when it comes to these social friendships. And sometimes we've let things slide with guys we really enjoyed, guys that were, in our best interest to hang with. Maybe they were on a basketball team with us or, some kind of a club or something. And then we stopped that for whatever reason and we don't see them anymore. And it's not because there was a painful breakup. It's not because we decided I never want to see him again. It's just that we went in different directions and that wonderful relationship was lost.
Sure.
And you have to go out of your way to dig that person up again. And sometimes it works out really well if just one person would take the risk of reigniting that relationship.
Well, and like you said, guys can be particularly bad at it, but I've got a friend who, he's such a good friend that I named my son after him. And, but we haven't spoken in 6 months. But if we started talking right now, we could talk for 2 hours and we'd pick up on the conversation where we left off last time.
Yeah, exactly.
And those kinds of friends are precious and not easily come by.
Well, the research says that we should emphasize those as importantly as diet and exercise.
Really?
You'll hear that with every person who's interested in promoting good health. I mean, there's diet and exercise are involved in everything, get enough sleep, keep your stress level down. All those things are great, but there needs to be the same degree of emphasis on friendships, on human connection. They could be any kind. I mean, it's one of the things to mention that it could be somebody who's a generation or two older than you or younger than you. Those things all count. It's just to have human connection where there's value, where there's meaning. I mean, one of the things the research says is that friends help us find meaning and purpose in life. There's something to be said about a funeral, or what they call them today, a celebration of life, where the entire town shows up because this is somebody that touched a lot of lives.
Right.
That's a rich life. That's a meaningful life when there are hundreds or more people going to see and to pay respects. And all of them have stories about how this person, crossed paths with them and touched their lives in some way. And the research says that person is more likely, again, to be happier, to have meaning in their lives, to feel like life has a specific meaning to them. And also, they're more likely to be physically well and less depressed, and again, to live longer.
So is there a trick to having a friend that lasts a long time, or is it just putting in the work like you do when you're doing exercise?
I think that is the trick. I think your question and your answer are one. That if anything that you're invested in, anything that matters to you, merits your attention and your investment, your time, your money, your energy. I mentioned these guys. There are like 6 of the guys that we hung with. There were more that haven't stayed in our little group, but I was just so tired of not getting together with these guys that I love. And I finally said, I picked a guy and I said, we're going to celebrate Gary's birthday in May over my house on the beach in Sarasota. You guys get your butt down here, because they're in, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. And you guys get here and, everything's on me. You can stay with me in my place. But if we don't commit to doing this, guess what? Our lives are going by and it's not going to happen. We have to go out of our way to make something happen, or it just doesn't happen. And that's sad. There's often a guy who does the initiating, and it's not usually me, but it has to be someone, or friendships fall apart. I have guys that every time I call them, they respond well, but they won't call me. We could do things together. We could have a great time. They're there for me if I need them. But if I don't call them, life will go by and I won't hear from them. And so one of the things guys have to do is keep in mind that there are male friends out there who will not initiate. And please don't take offense, because they don't initiate with anybody except for maybe their wives. And, stay on it. Invest in the things that matter to you. And I guess what I'm saying is, according to research, friendships should matter to you, because what we get from them is so far much more positive when we have good quality friends. And there's even a way to measure if it's a good quality friend. We know that good quality friendships are much like the one you were talking about. They have stability. They're stable. That, they're not always a roller coaster ride. You call the guy up, we pick up where we left off. There's always caring. It's positive. It's a long-standing bond. And also, there's another factor where it's a helpful thing and it's a reciprocal thing. It's not a one-sided thing where you talk and I listen. You hurt and I help. And, nothing is ever about me. It's always about me helping you, because those things end up being, those one-sided relationships end up being draining, and they fall apart lots of times because it wasn't enough give and take. Or like one guy's T-shirt said give and the other one said take. It has to be reciprocal.
Got it. Well, we talked a lot about relationships as it deals with between men and just in general friendship. Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about the relationships that maybe are the most difficult to manage of all, and that's the relationship between man and woman.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I got a lot for that too.
All right. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes on TNCRadio.live, Building Strong Minds with Dr. Chris Cortman. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. In part one, we were talking about stress. And I shared a story about how some people actually escape stress by jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. For most of us, that would be an experience that would create stress. So, what in the world is stress? Stress is a specific reaction in the body to a non-specific stimulus, meaning anything can create stress for someone if they perceive it as a threat. Now, what happens when we're stressed is that the body is preparing us to do one of two things, either to fight or to flight. And most of us understand that best when we think of an example like seeing flashing lights in our rearview mirror. We automatically know how it feels when that police officer is bearing down on us and we need to pull over. You know, our hearts start racing and our chest gets constricted and tight, and you know, our breathing becomes rapid and shallow, and the blood's pumping to the major muscle groups, you know, chest, back, arms, shoulders, again, preparing us to take some action. And if you follow that scenario all the way through, whether or not the police officer pulls us over or is aiming for the next guy, usually minutes later, the stress response stops. You know, we return to normal, to equilibrium. And, you know, it was just there for a burst, that whole fight or flight. That's called an alarm reaction. There was a professor at the University of Montreal, a guy named Hans Selye, who studied what he called the GAS syndrome. GAS, not the kind that my kids complain about, but GAS stands for the General Adaptation Syndrome. And that's how the body prepares and deals with stress. So the very first stage of stress is this alarm reaction where we go into fight or flight. I'll take you through the next two stages and then what we could do about stress in the upcoming videos.
Hot Shots Secret presents Steve Summers' Overnight Drive nightly at midnight Eastern, 11 Central on tncradio.live or download the app .tncradio.live.
We were having so much fun talking as friends, we forgot to come back and do the show. What happens sometimes? So we're talking about relationships tonight, and so
we were practicing what we preach.
That's right. That's right. But you know, one of the more difficult relationships for most guys, and you know, most people, is the relationship with the opposite sex. And you know, for some people, you know, no big deal. They got away with the ladies. For most people, not as much, and you know, it can be very stressful, and sometimes those happy moments in a marriage end up later becoming very stressful moments and not near as much fun. So let's talk a little bit about that all-important relationship of husband-wife, partner, however you want to put it. Where do you want to start there?
Yeah, well, a lot of research there too. Some people just call them LTRs, long-term relationships. I'm always amused when they advertise in some of those websites where people are meeting people online, that people are looking for LTRs, and you look at their age and they're 92 and you think, how long are they hoping this is going to go? But LTRs, long-term relationships, are they're linked with so much good health and outcomes. When a man and a woman are married or together in whatever way for 50, 60 years, it usually is indicative of good health and happiness and, again, longevity. and far less associated with mental health issues like depression and anxiety. Conversely, a bad marriage, a high conflict marriage, I remember one research study said that it is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day on your body to be in a high conflict relationship like a marriage. And therefore, we have to keep in mind that, relationships aren't always positive. If they're high conflict, they can be very bad. Humans do not do well with conflict. There's an abundance of research on how conflict is bad for human beings. But back to the long-term relationship, when there's a stable, sturdy, dependable long-term relationship between man and woman, it goes very well, especially for men. The research says that a man is more healthy in part because I believe this was a University of Texas study in the last, 5-6 years, found that women serve as a life coach for men, a health coach. That is, and this has happened in my practice. I know an attorney, he and his wife were on my couch, and he says, I had a chest pain, and she says, we're going to the ER. And he says, no, I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. She said, no, we're going to the ER, and we're going now, or I'm going to call 911. So she drags him to the emergency room, and the physician tells him after a few tests, good thing you have a wife, because you would have died in the next 24 hours because you have this thing called the widow maker, and it was about to make her a widow.
Wow.
So this guy's alive 10, 12 years later, and it's strictly because of that. And so does that happen all the time? Well, it happens in a lot of different varieties. Because of having a long-term partner who's a female, men drink less when they're in relationships like that. They smoke less. They eat less terrible things for them. Although if there's one area that it doesn't come out as bright and shiny as all the others, it would be weight, because married men tend to weigh more than their single counterparts, because their eating they eat more at home. They have good home cooking. But in all other areas, including, and this is a fascinating one, money making and success at work, married men do better and they make more money. And researchers have not been able to figure out why, but when a man gets divorced, his income goes into a nosedive, and not just because he's paying alimony and child support. Men make less money. And then what's just as fascinating is when he gets remarried, it increases again. It's fascinating. They don't know exactly how to explain that, but it's one of those things that has been demonstrated over time. Married men live longer. Married men are far less likely to have issues with depression and anxiety disorders. Married men have more sex and better sex. And a lot of single guys would say, that's not my experience. But overall, that's absolutely consistent with the research. There's this whole Playboy image and the single guy who goes from bed to bed. But, overall, the research says, no, not so. A committed, long-term monogamous relationship is your best bet.
In day-to-day interactions with women, I think men are often confused.
I'm not going to dispute that. They are different animals completely. And I say that not just as a man who's been through my share of all of this, and I have. I would want my listeners to know I am not from on high. I have been divorced twice, And I have had, personal issues in relationships for sure. But men and women are different. We think differently. We have different values. We communicate differently. And there's a slew of research to demonstrate that. One of the more interesting research studies demonstrates communication. For instance, a woman, at least a number of years ago, I read this, a woman will say something like 28,000 words in a day, whereas a man was inclined to say 12,000 words in a day. She'll say more than 2 words to every one that I say. And the man would get most of those words taken care of at work. And when he gets home, he just doesn't have a lot to say. He's kind of used his quota for the day. And that could be very frustrating for a woman who's looking to, not only talk about what she's been through in the day, what's frustrating, what's wonderful, what's funny, what's interesting, but she wants to hear the same thing from him. And he's like, I got nothing. He's just like, I'm spent.
That's right.
I just want to relax. I want to listen to the news. I want to read the paper. I want to watch TV. I want to see the kids. But that's an important issue. The communication thing is in research after research study, women would say that was the number one issue in their relationship. There was inadequate, communication.
Several years ago, the book was published called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have kind of poo-pooed the book ever since and made fun of it or whatever. While I guess some of his opinions maybe didn't stand the test of time, I think in a lot of ways, his bottom line assumptions were not real far off.
John Gray wrote that book, and he made a real contribution by making the entire world aware of this differences between the sexes. There are better, as in more accurate and research-based books, like Deborah Tannen is a psychologist, and she wrote a book called You Just Don't Understand. And it's fascinating when you actually study the differences between men and women. One of the big differences, we're talking about married and long-term partners. One of the big differences seems to be in the sexual realm as well. As a heterosexual male with a normal or healthy libido, I would say we as men have sex and love in 2 different jars, and that's how we emerge in puberty. Our first orgasms have nothing to do with caring about the welfare of another person for life. They're not about emotional connection or emotional intimacy. They're about boobs and butts and hair and lips and vaginas. And, that's what they're about what psychologists call erotic focus. That's what male sexuality is about. Now, we can learn to put them in one jar. I mean, we could be sexually attracted and motivated to be sexual with someone we also care about. And hopefully that's what happens in a long-term relationship. But the multi-billion-dollar industry of pornography, that's for men. That's not for women. Women are the stars of it, but it's for men. And women don't spend money on prostitutes. Even male prostitutes are for other men. Women don't typically want to have sex with... My dog has his own opinion on these things. You can probably hear him barking.
Apparently he does.
But men are the ones who want to have sex with people whose first names we don't know. That's not a female thing. Typically, women don't desire to be sexually intimate unless there's an emotional connection first. Women like to be connected intimately, emotionally, before physically. And a lot of you guys can back me up on that, because you go away on your long trips. That's what you do for a living. And when you come back, it would be nice to be sexually intimate, but your wife doesn't want that because she feels like there's an emotional distance. You've been gone for 6 days. Whoa, slow down, partner. Let's reconnect. She's not interested in the sexual intimacy until we have an emotional intimacy. And I had to learn that because I'm a man. And it's like, how soon can we reconnect physically? And the answer to that is not until I feel like I know you again. No, I'm the same guy who left on Friday. Yeah, no. It's a much, much different way to conceptualize sexuality. So a woman wants to be sexual because she's connected. And as it's been said before, a man is sexually aroused, so he touches. A woman is touched, so she's sexually aroused.
Exactly.
And there are really significant differences. And we should never expect them to be us, because it doesn't work out that way. They aren't, and they don't process things in the same way that we do. And it's not like one is superior to the other. It's just significantly different. Although it's probably a lot easier to have sex and love in the same jar like women have. It makes more sense that way, because we can be really such primitive beasts that we just want to get it going. And, there's all kinds of terrible stories about men doing sexual things with objects and, having to call the EMT because a guy's stuck in the pool filter. And, because men, the sexual thing is just such a strong drive to, to finish, to orgasm, to ejaculate. And, you'll hear things like a hard penis has no conscience. And that's not how women are built. They're not like us in that way. Women tell me all the time, they can shut their sexuality off when they don't have a relationship. Like they went 6 years between partners. And you know what they did in that time? Nothing. They weren't sexual because they can shut that off. Well, for a guy, it's not about whether we have a partner. That thing is on. It's for us. It's analogous to hunger. So we're hungry even if we don't have a partner. So it's really quite a challenge to navigate that part of a relationship, and it's difficult because women more frequently than men and more often than men lose their sexual desire as they age. And there are difficulties on both sides. For a male, it's no secret that erectile dysfunction hits like half of the guys or more after a certain age, at least to some extent. And the older we get, the older guys will laugh and say, yeah, I couldn't do anything about that if I tried. They'll make jokes like that because the blood flow is not the same there. Well, women have an issue too, where they're incapable of being sufficiently lubricated, and they have painful intercourse. It's not pleasurable anymore. It actually hurts, and that contributes to a loss of desire. And then, of course, if we do anything that really hurts them emotionally, that's one of the first places where it manifests itself, right? A woman will shut off that sexuality when she feels unsafe, when she feels invalidated, when she feels disrespected, when she feels taken for granted, or, a woman wants to be sexual because all the other parts are working right. She feels cherished. She feels appreciated. She feels attractive. She feels emotionally intimate and special. You have time for her. It's like all the planets have to align. And then a woman is much more likely to desire you because the connection is good.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on TNCRadio.live.
This blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 best scenic drives for truck drivers. One of the many benefits of being a truck driver is traveling the beautiful United States. Truck drivers spend their life on the road. Although they may get tired of driving, there's still routes and attractions most look forward to seeing. Whether it be cruising down the coast of California, driving in the Smoky Mountains, or passing through the Arizona desert, truck drivers all have their personal favorites. Here are the 5 most beautiful scenic drives rated by truck drivers. Pacific Coast Highway. The Pacific Coast in California, also called Highway 1, is one of the most iconic scenic drives in the United States. Driving along the Pacific Coast reminds you of a movie or TV show. It's about 650 miles long and runs from Capistrano Beach in Orange County to Leggett in northern Mendocino. San Juan Skyway. San Juan Skyway, a scenic byway in Colorado, is known for its million-dollar views. The byway goes across the San Juan National Forest and has provided truckers with beautiful views of the mountains and landscape. Beartooth Highway. Beartooth Highway in Montana is a 68-mile byway that runs through southwest Montana and northwest Wyoming and goes into Yellowstone National Park. Along this drive, you'll see one of the most diverse ecosystems accessible by vehicle in the United States. Keep in mind that the scenic highway closes in the winter due to adverse winter conditions and typically opens up on Memorial Day weekend. I-64 in West Virginia. West Virginia has some of the most beautiful landscapes on the East Coast. Driving down I-64 in West Virginia feels like you're in a painting. If you have time to stop along your truck route, check out Tamarack, located just off I-64 in Beckley, West Virginia. Tamarack is a unique culture center with art from local artisans and delicious food. If you want the full Appalachian experience, check out Tamarack. Utah's Route 12. Utah's Route 12 is one of the most scenic routes in the United States. It's often called the All-American Road. Also, there are 2 national parks at each end of the road, Bryce Canyon and Capitol Reef, and many other unique scenic views. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Join Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time for Women Road Warriors on your driver navigation station, tncradio.live.
Welcome back, TNCRadio.live. This is Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Kelly, and we've been tonight talking about relationships. A lot of stuff there to unpack, Dr. Cortman. There's a lot of resources that men can look at to try to get more relationship information. I'm guessing that you would not direct us to Facebook, and I'm guessing you would not direct us to Penthouse Forum or Playboy Magazine or Maxim or any. Okay, so if I'm out there driving right now and I want to download some resources to listen to later, because we've got another great show coming on right after this one. So
they shouldn't do that during the next hour,
right? Course. Because they're still driving anyway. So, but if they were to download some more resources, how about books that that you've written, books that you would recommend to others? Standard guy. I just want to get better at relationships, especially with my spouse. What's some good resources to go look at?
Well, you are correct that I wouldn't recommend some of those other places, but there are a number of books that can be quite helpful. But there's a gentleman who is like the guru for marital research named Dr. John Gottman, a psychologist out of the state of Washington. That's Gottman. And Gottman's research is fascinating, at least to me, because it's not the stuff that you would expect. Let me share with you one of the research findings that I found so interesting, and that is he noted that couples stay together when they have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive things said to every negative thing. It's not that they could never say anything negative or critical, but the other person had to be enveloped in positivity. And other research has demonstrated that you can even have, a knock them down, drag them out kind of a yelling thing if it was over something really significant and you're demonstrating how upset you were, as long as that's not what you typically do. The person actually learns that mostly I get positive things. My spouse loves me to death. So if he did get that upset, and that occasionally, it doesn't destroy the relationship and can even actually enhance things, because I learned that my behavior was really, really upsetting to him and unacceptable. So I mentioned before how bad conflict is for people. He had research that could predict with 96% accuracy what couples were going to get divorced just by how they talk to one another. And he would measure their arousal, meaning how upset they got, how quickly they got upset, and how upset, just by picking out a controversial topic of some kind and having them talk about it. And he'd kind of hook them up to electrodes and such just to see, their blood pressure, just to see how upset they got. And when they got that upset and that quickly, they were very, very likely to not make it, to a long-term relationship. So things like that I would recommend. There are other books out there. I'll mention some of them. There's a marriage counseling workbook, Beyond Messy Relationships, Married Roommates, Easy Marriage Counseling, Loving Your Spouse When You Feel Like Walking Away, No More Fighting. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but I'm also going to say not just reading books, but here's another one: 8 Dates, Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Gottman is one of the authors on that one, and so is his wife, Dr. Julie Schwartz Gottman. So anyway, but my point is, I think you would do well if you sought some kind of help with your spouse and without your spouse, just to work on being a better communicator. Somebody who invests more. I always demand from my couples, do you guys have a date night? There needs to be a night. I don't care if you have 12 kids. There needs to be a night that's just about you and me, because this relationship will get old and crusty, and it'll fall apart if I don't continue to invest in you. That's important. And one of the things that couples will find, and I know we're going to wrap up soon, is that if I take charge one week of the date, you take charge the next week. Both of us should be invested in making our date night special, because that's a way of rebuilding the us and re-emphasizing the us. Anything that is not watered or nurtured will die. And that's true about relationships, Tom.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a lot of great information. How can people reach you? learn more about you?
Yeah, srqshrink.com. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me in other kinds of social media, or just, they can find me at my office or in any of my books on Amazon. Happy to talk to anybody.
Fantastic. You've been listening to TNCRadio.live. This is Building.live. This is Building.live. This is Building.live. This is Building.live.